Hi there, and welcome to Legacy Builders. I am your host, Matt Herriman. I'm so excited to dive into the stories of leadership, community building, and the legacies of individuals that they are creating across various sectors, with the goal of inspiring you, the listeners, by highlighting the power of community and others' stories. Let's get started. Hey everybody, my name is Matt Herriman, and I am thrilled to welcome you to the first episode of Legacy Builders with Matt Herriman. As I kind of reflected over the past year, several years really, of just life and business and personal life and the community and with family, I was trying to think about 2025 and setting some goals and kind of dreaming and scheming, as we say, and sat down with several people that I know and love and have a lot of confidence in and trust in, and was just trying to figure out what are some things that I can do to continue to, one, build a brand. As many as you know, I just recently ran for city council and really enjoyed that experience. And at some point in this podcast, I'm sure we'll get more into that experience itself. But just trying to figure out what in 2025 I can do to kind of continue to build on that. One of the things that I absolutely love is sitting down with people, hearing their stories, things that shape them, things they've learned, and learning from their shared experiences. And so I landed on a podcast. So why not start a podcast? Sat down with Trent Denson here, who has Spread the Positive Network, and there was honestly a lot of synergy with what he has going on here, and so started to put together a plan and a concept to bring you guys the stories of people in our community, in our state, maybe even in our nation, of their stories, where they grew up, formative experiences in their lives, business owners who, have had lots of highs and lows. And obviously in life, we learn so much more in the valleys. And so sitting down with entrepreneurs and business owners and community leaders and really understanding in those valleys, what are the things that they learned most. I think, a lot of times we forget that people have long journeys to get where they are. We oftentimes only see like the present, and oftentimes can be very envious of where they are and wish we were there. And we oftentimes also falsely believe that, the journey that they had to get there wasn't difficult when it very much very likely was. And so I'm just really excited about Legacy Builders and getting the opportunity to bring to you, the listeners, stories of these community leaders, these political leaders, business owners and entrepreneurs, to hear their stories, hopefully to inspire you by highlighting their stories and you being able to see the power of community and community service and all of those things that really are values of mine. My core beliefs, which are faith, family, community, and health. I think there'll be you'll see a lot of people in this studio or, zooming in, so to speak, who share a lot of those same values. And so I hope you'll take the time to stick with us. I'm super excited about some of the guests that we have lined up over the next several months, and really hope you enjoy it. So before we really go much further, I think it's really important for people who don't know me to get the opportunity to get to know a little bit more about me, who I am, where I came from, kind of start with my story before we hear other people's stories and learn from those shared experiences. So I kind of want to dive into my personal journey of how I got to sitting in this seat talking to you guys. So I am a Tennessee native, which, as for those of us here in Middle Tennessee, seems to be becoming a rare thing with the folks that are moving in here from other states, which is great. But Tennessee native, grew up in West Tennessee, small town called Bolivar, kind of between Jackson and Memphis, very rural community of about, 6 to 8,000 people. I think the county's population somewhere around, 20,000, give or take a few thousand people. It was very much your rural American upbringing. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody, for the most part, lots of the same folks in your neighborhood were also the people that, you went to church with and to school with, and, you went to church with your dentist and most of your school teachers, and just a very much a kind of, stereotypical rural America experience, and was blessed to have parents that instilled in me early on the importance of faith and the importance of family and the importance of community, which I alluded to are those are 3 of my 4 really core values, with health being the 4th one of those. And we'll dive deeper into those 4 kind of core beliefs for me later. But had amazing parents that really instilled those values in me early on, and was one of the, we went to the First Baptist Church there in town, and my dad was chairman of the deacons at some point, and they were Sunday school teachers. So almost to the point of being raised a pastor kid, but not an actual pastor's kid. Which really shaped me in a lot of ways. In some ways in my own personal faith journey, somewhat of like, really struggling as I got older with this whole legalism thing, which is like a whole nother can of worms that maybe at some point we'll do like a special episode on that. But, was really blessed with being able to grow up in a community that really, one, valued community, valued family, and valued faith. And for me, my grandparents lived basically across the street from me. My dad has 3 sisters. 2 of his 3 sisters lived within walking distance in the same neighborhood. And so, like, family is incredibly important to me. And I think that has shaped me as I've gotten older and now have 3 kids of my own. The importance of family to them, and having their family close to them, and spending time with family, and lots of times in this thing we call life, family may be the only people you have, and so the importance of that relationship and that bond. So I grew up in Bolivar, went to Bolivar Central High School, graduated in 2009, and most of my friends growing up were going to go to UT Martin, an hour and a half, 2 hours, I guess, max from Bolivar. And I've always, and my parents will probably tell you this, I've always, kind of been, I guess, a maverick in some ways. I don't really go with the grain. And so I was like, you know what? And part of this was I just grew up a huge Tennessee fan. So, knock me for wanting to go to a school for sports. That's part of the reason that I picked the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. But I also was, like, at the time, one of 2 or 3 from my high school, which graduated around 200, a little over 200. I was going to go to Knoxville. And so I knew from the outset it was going to be really challenging because, one, it was 6.5 hours from home. So I was going to be put in an environment where I'd never been before. I say that, I guess I should back up, because it's a really important experience that I had as a 15-year-old, and I'll get back to going off to college, but as a 15-year-old, I got the opportunity to go to DC for the first time. A teacher of mine nominated me for I think what was called like the National Young Leaders Conference, which sounds super cliche or original, I guess, but that's what it was called. And so they brought in teenagers, high schoolers from across the country to DC. It's a week in February. I remember I was 15 years old. Still to this day, I'm the first of two kids. My parents have me and my younger brother. And so, I still to this day am shocked that my parents put me on a plane in Memphis, Tennessee, and let me fly by myself to Washington, D.C. and attend this conference. But I honestly am so grateful that they did, because that was a formative experience for me. I'd been interested in the political world prior to, being 15. My granddad, who owned a real estate and auction company, was very active in the community, and should probably do a special segment on him, because he's in so many ways my hero. Passed away earlier this year in April 2024, and but he had a huge impact on my life. Owned a real estate and auction company just off the square in downtown Bolivar. Was active in the Rotary Club, on and off planning commission. He just was always doing things. Everybody in Bolivar and Hardeman County knew E.W. McKinney. And so and really because of that, he was like, to me, just like this, he was my hero. So during in the summers, or when we had time off, I'd tell my mom, take me to Papa's office. I want to hang out with Papa, and because he was a mover and shaker, and he just went places, and just enjoyed that. So from an early age, that was another thing of that's really where my love of community came from, was really seeing and watching him for 18 years of my life growing up in Bolivar, the love that he had for community and for people and for service and for giving back. And so by the time I was 15 and had a teacher nominate me for this, I'd helped my grandfather with a few different, when Lamar ran for the U.S. Senate in 2002, I remember slapping Lamar stickers on people at the field trials over there for the bird dogs and the border of Fayette and Hardeman County. And a gentleman in our church named Ron Stallings ran against John Wilder, the sitting lieutenant governor, back in 2006. And I remember helping him, and, it was still very Democratic area of the state, and Ron was unsuccessful. It was just a fun experience thing that I vividly remember being a part of. So fast forward to and getting this chance to go to DC, and I just remember begging my parents, I'm like, you have to let me do this, and they, somewhat to my surprise, but just have, looking back, deep gratitude for them allowing me to do this. So go to DC. Bob Corker had just been elected to the United States Senate. I believe it was 2006. It was all the same year. So this was actually early 2007. That race was 06. So get to go to DC. They kind of had a mock Congress that entire week. We got to see and meet all of our, congressional delegation, Bob Corker and Lamar Alexander and Marsha Blackburn. And I just remember leaving that experience just in awe of just our country, and just remember feeling just this deep sense of gratitude for the experience. And that was where, a lot of people talk about catching the bug. I guess I caught the bug for, political involvement. I mean, the seed had been planted much earlier than that trip. So when I graduated high school to go to Knoxville, I was going to do the, major in political science. And, the plan was to, essentially go and get my law degree and kind of go that path. And I got the opportunity to intern in Senator Corker's Knoxville office. Met a guy named David Leverton, who I actually plan and hope to have on the podcast at some point. But most Tennessee fans will know David because he was on the national championship team and was our punter, and in some ways kind of made a game-saving tackle in the national championship game. But at the time, this was, I guess, 2010, David was running Senator Corker's Knoxville office. And so I just had an incredible experience getting to do that. And really, some people would probably disagree just or think I'm crazy, because really one of the things that like the interns did was answer the phone. So we were like the first lines of the people who were mad because their Social Security check didn't come in on time or something. And so that for me as a, I guess, 19-year-old was an incredible experience, because I was thrust into this world of really like customer service and dealing with people. And so loved that experience, and really all the people that I worked with in that office, I still keep in touch with. David now lives here in Middle Tennessee in the Franklin area, and actually is over, kind of does communications for, and PR for Ascension St. Thomas, their Tennessee network of hospitals and clinics. And so got to do that, have that opportunity. And then in, I guess, my junior year at UT, 2012, that spring semester of my junior year, I was selected to participate in the state legislative internship. And so lots of universities, private and public, across Tennessee, select interns from each of their universities, their colleges of political science, to participate in this. And you get a stipend. I mean, it's a really remarkable internship for those that are looking to kind of go into the government space. And of course, there's all different directions you can go in that space. And so in so many ways, some of the people that you'll meet on this podcast, I can trace back to that internship. And honestly, if there's people that are listening to this podcast that are younger, that are still in their college years or just immediate post-college, I cannot tell you enough how important these internships are. And it's cliche, but it's incredibly true that they are what you make them. And thankfully for me at the time, I just took total advantage of that internship, and made sure I was a kind of a ruthless networker. Some of my close friends still call me kind of a ruthless networker, but I think what really it just boils down to, I love people. I love hearing their stories. And so I just thrive in environments like that where I don't know people, and get the opportunity to hear where they came from and how they were shaped. And so in so many ways, that internship for me, from a personal and a professional level, really has shaped both my personal and professional career. I can trace so much of the people that I know, have worked for, have worked with, back to that internship. So that was spring of 2012. I got to participate in that legislative internship as an intern. Got to really learn the committee process, really, as they say, how the sausage works. And it was obviously very different than what you read about in the textbook in your Poli-Sci 101 class. But so that was a real formative experience for me that really led into that summer. I got to work on my first paid political campaign, which was for a lady named Deborah Maggart, who at the time was the Republican caucus chairman in the House. And ironically, Deborah was taken out by the NRA. And what's interesting about that is and I'll get to it, but fast forward, almost 10 years from then, or 8 years from that point, I end up working for the NRA. So I'll bring that full circle in a few minutes. But So I got the opportunity to work on Deborah's campaign, just kind of really boots on the ground, grassroots effort on her campaign. Obviously, she was unsuccessful. The NRA actually went after her. There was a bill that session that they really wanted passed. It didn't get passed. And frankly, what happened was, they said, well, we're going to take somebody out in leadership. And they kind of started going down the pecking order. And she was one of the only ones, I think, in leadership that had a primary opponent, meaning another Republican running against her. And so they picked Deborah, and they spent a lot of money to beat her, to to essentially make an example of her to others. And I know there's some people listening that'll talk about, we spend another episode on, those semantics and so, because I have thoughts and whatnot on how all of that works. But nonetheless, she was defeated. I went back and finished my senior year at UT, and was really trying to figure out what I was going to do next. I was about a month out from graduation and still didn't know. And, I really wanted to stay in Knoxville. And I will never forget, this is how, hardwired it is into my brain. It was a Sunday afternoon, early April. A guy by the name of Josh Thomas called me 2:00 and said, hey, there's this guy named Jim Tracy who is running for Congress, kind of in the Murfreesboro, Middle Tennessee area. And they need like a body man. In the political world, a body man is kind of an A to Z person. And so they needed somebody to come and drive him across the district, meet with donors, go to events, and kind of be the utility player, so to speak. And so he was a state senator at the time. And so I moved to Murfreesboro after graduating from UT to work for Jim. And just still to this day, Jim is a great friend and mentor I still keep in touch with. He lives in Murfreesboro now from Shelbyville. And actually left his campaign in May. This would have been 2014. Left his campaign there in May of 2014, about 3 months before the actual election, to go into ministry. And had kind of felt this pull towards ministry for some time. A mentor of mine at the time named Brian Owen, who was the college/young adult pastor at New Vision Church here in Murfreesboro. Something he and I had talked about for a long time. So I had an opportunity to go on staff on an interim basis to fill an interim role in the children's ministry at New Vision. So I did that for a few months, and then was able to get a position at First Baptist Church in Hendersonville, Tennessee, working under a guy by the name of Brandon James. What's interesting about Brandon, and this is like one of those only God stories, but Brandon's dad, Ernie, was my pastor growing up in the First Baptist Church in Bolivar. And so kind of another like full circle moment. Brandon was kind of over all things really young adult and younger, I guess down to like children's at First Baptist. And so we'd connected and got the opportunity to go and really start a college ministry for First Baptist Hendersonville, which I'm very proud. Fast forward, I guess, 5-6 years, they still have it. And so that was around the time the state had passed this, I'm going to blanking on the name, but basically the free 2 years of community college. And so there was a lot more high schoolers choosing to stay. And there was a community college, Ball State Community College, like 5-10 minutes from the church down the street. And so they saw at the time a really unique opportunity to start to really minister to that age group of kind of 18 to 25-year-olds who were deciding to stay home and not go off to college and do the take advantage of that 2 years. So I had that opportunity. Then I got the chance to go and work at a a place called the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, which is kind of the public policy political arm of the Southern Baptist Convention, and had the chance to work under some really incredible leaders there. One of which at the time was the executive vice president, Philip Bethencourt. He's now back in College Station, Texas, leading Central Baptist Church there. And then obviously the president at the time was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Russell Moore, who a lot of people know and came to know in 2016. He was on the magazine of National Review as kind of a never Trumper. So that was an interesting experience for me in so many ways. And maybe I'd even dedicate an episode to kind of just talking about my time there and the things I learned, the people I met. I got to meet Jimmy Carter with Dr. Moore at his presidential library. That was like super cool. Obviously most people would agree, not the greatest of presidents, but like a really stellar human being. So I did that. I was in that position at the ERLC for a year and a half before we had my wife and I had our first kid. And I guess, let's see, our oldest Judah was born in 2017. So while I was at the ERLC, my wife Morgan and I had our first kid, Judah, in February of 2017, and so that was kind of I joke it wasn't at all a midlife crisis because I was like 24, I think, when he was born. But it was one of those moments of like, what am I doing? I was in more of an administrative job that I could do as a type A person, but was not really thriving, and so really kind of went on this journey of like, what's next, and ended up going into financial planning with the company in Brentwood, and was really enjoying that because, again, it was very people oriented, and so through that experience, I reconnected with a guy named Shane Reeves, who I'm excited to announce will be our first guest on the podcast. But Shane was running a company or getting started on a company at that time called 12 Stone Health Partners. And so he and I had reconnected, and I'd stayed in touch with Jim Tracy. And so through that summer of 2017, as Donald Trump won. He got sworn in January of 17. And oftentimes what happens is, obviously brings in a whole new administration. Well, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has all of these state level positions and that are political appointees. And one of them's basically this, the head of USDA for Tennessee, essentially. And Jim Tracy was up to be really nominated for that. And so kind of through that late summer, Jim's kind of waiting for the Senate to approve it. And he talked to Shane about it. And so Shane, essentially says, well, if this happens and there's a special election, I'm going to run. So ended up talking more with Shane about politics and potential of a campaign than I did, financial planning type stuff. And so he ends up saying, well, why don't you come run my campaign for state Senate? And so my wife, who's from Murfreesboro, we met at New Vision. We had our first kid at this point. Is about 6 months old. Our family's all here. So it was really a God thing of like, okay, this may be him saying we can get back to Murfreesboro. From the day we put the sign in the yard in Hendersonville to the day we closed was 3 weeks. So it was like very much confirmation from the Lord that it was like his blessing on the transition and not something we were forcing. So moved to Murfreesboro to help Shane run his state Senate campaign. Obviously, he was successful in the Republican primary, and after the primary was over, had several different opportunities in the political space come my direction, which were somewhat unanticipated. And one of those was a call from, at the time, even still is, our Lieutenant Governor, Randy McNally. And so Randy asked if I would oversee all of the state Senate Republican reelection campaigns that 2018 cycle. And just an incredible opportunity. I think still to this day, think the world of Randy and his chief of staff, Rick Nicholson, who was a part of that. So I kind of became the Senate's political director for that 2018 cycle. And, it's a really cool opportunity. And obviously there was a gubernatorial race in 2018. So I was in a really unique position with the other races going on. And so one of the guys that I had the opportunity to meet during that time was a guy named Blake Harris, somebody else who I plan and hope to have on the podcast at some point. But Blake was running at the time candidate Bill Lee's campaign. And so Blake and I really just hit it off and, shared a lot of same values. And so he had a company that did political work from phones to polling to digital. I mean, lots of different things. And so his company ended up doing several things for the races that we were working on that cycle. And so we started working more with each other. And I was honestly at the time, he and I talked about, after all the campaigns were over with, going to work for him at his company and, essentially helping him recruit candidates and run races really across the country. And I won't forget, just a couple of weeks out from the election, he mentioned that he was having conversations with Bill about being his chief of staff, with the assumption we would win. And so sure enough, obviously the Bill won, became Governor Bill Lee, and Blake joined the transition team. And then shortly after the transition got started, had the opportunity to join the transition team with the plan to join the legislative team once that once the governor was inaugurated. So that was, for me as a lifelong Tennessean, just a dream opportunity. And honestly, for me, it was, I can with a straight face sit back and say there was never a point in time in a few of those years where I thought, I'm going to figure out a way to work in the governor's office. Obviously, it's a dream, and really was one of those things that only God could have done. Because he had kind of really, for me, the time in ministry reoriented a lot of my own really ambitions, and also just selfish ambitions, I guess is a better way to put it. And so it was an incredible opportunity to be able to be a part of a transition team to set up an administration for the next governor, the 50th governor of the state of Tennessee, Bill Lee, for somebody that grew up here and just really loves the state, loves its people. And then obviously the opportunity to drive to Nashville every day, even on I-24, and walk up those steps of that Capitol to an office there. Still is almost like pinch worthy for me. And I do not at all take that opportunity that I had for granted, because I know there's so many other people who would love to be in that position. But the ability to step foot in that building every day alongside the governor and the rest of our team for the time that I was able to do it, and I mean this in the purest of ways, with every day thinking, how can we make the lives of 6.5 million people better today? And we talked about that often. I know, that a lot of people, are naysayers about politics and politicians, but, and I'm obviously very biased, but, our team really sat in meetings and we were discussing ideas and directions and dreaming for the next, 4, hopefully at the time, 8 years, which he's obviously going to have. how we could leave this state a better place for the people that live here and call it home, and the people that want to move here, people that have lived here their entire lives. And so for me, I'll always look back on that opportunity and with gratitude and thankfulness, and so was there for about a year, and I guess maybe a little less, if you count the transition. And Blake called me one night and asked if I would be interested in going to work for this gun organization called the National Rifle Association. And so it was a really unique and cool opportunity at the time. I mean, obviously was not at all looking to leave the governor's office, 10, 11 months into his tenure. But it was an opportunity. At that point, we had 2 kids, just couldn't pass it up to cover 4 states for the NRA, to really be their kind of head lobbyist in all 4 states. So it was Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. So left the governor's office to go lobby for the National Rifle Association. Honestly, I could probably do an entire episode on my time there, so I won't bore you with a ton of details or stories, but it's say enough to say that, for me, that was an also really incredible professional opportunity, issue aside, where I really got to sharpen people skills. I got to learn the power of negotiation, so many different things that I could look back again and probably do a whole episode on this. But my only regret for my time at the NRA was not keeping a journal, because I probably could write a book, not just do a podcast on my time there, of just things that I learned and saw. And, all 4 states operate so drastically different, which I think for me, I gathered such an appreciation for how the founders set this country up to be really, and even though we've gotten away from it in some ways, to really be a true federalist society where the states, rule and they're their own governing bodies. And so it was a unique experience for me to see, not everybody does the committee process like Tennessee, and not everybody elects their state officials the same way that Tennessee does, or Louisiana or Mississippi or Arkansas, and just all the different nuances of how their, legislative bodies within those states work. So that was just an incredible opportunity for me. Obviously, I was there during 2020. So like a lot of people's stories now, post 2020, my salary was cut. Wife stays at home, still needed to provide. And so at that point in time, that was when I thought, I'm going to get my real estate license. So I mentioned my grandfather earlier, owned a real estate and auction business. My mom was part of his real estate company, and she was also part-time community banker doing loans and mortgage and stuff. So I grew up in this community banking world. And in some way, I loved real estate. I mean, it was very common for me to be at a showing with my granddad, or going out with him to appraise property, or do a survey. I mean, just exposed to so many different aspects of real estate growing up because of my granddad. Auctions. I mean, I remember doing tons of estate auctions with him. And so that was when I was in 2020 into 21, got my real estate license, and started to kind of do that on the side. And so during that time, one of the groups that I met was a company called Noble Education Initiative, and they had at the time been approved to open a charter school in Rutherford County, specifically the Murfreesboro area. And so I'd been connected with them, started helping them look for property, and I don't know, 7-8 months into that process, 7-8 months into that process of looking for land, we they said, why don't you come work for us? And so I was still working for NRA, covering 4 states, traveling. At this point, we had 3 kids. So went to work for Noble Education in November of 22, just after that election cycle with the NRA. And, another, for me, great experience to kind of come in of a smaller organization and really learn and do a lot of things. And so I got to be on the front end of helping develop and build what is now Rutherford Collegiate Prep. They opened in August of this year, 2024. And so my title was something to do with external affairs and development. And so got to see behind the scenes of how, all of that works. How do you go from, not having a charter school to having a charter school, and that whole entire process of the application to approval to then going out and on the real estate side, finding the land. And in this case, it had to be annexed and rezoned, and then getting the permits and all of the things that go into that to start building it. So that was an incredible experience that I still, at this point in time, I still consult for them. I don't work for them full time anymore, but I still, consult for them and keep in touch with them on a weekly basis and kind of just work with them on a few different projects here and there. So back in July of this year, 2024, I left there formally and moved into the consulting role, just as the council campaign came to a close. So that kind of gets you to mostly to present day. I know I didn't talk a ton. I did run for city council this summer. It was honestly a really great experience. It was a very unique experience, having worked a lot of different campaigns, being the actual candidate. It's hard to describe. I had to apologize to Senator Shane Reeves a few times throughout the course of the summer because of, the hard times I gave him when he was running for state senate. Now I understand what was going on in his head as the candidate. But it was a great experience. And, there was 5 of us that ran for 3 spots, and all 3 incumbents won. And most people in Murfreesboro would tell you it was one of the closest council races that they remember in the past 30 years. I came in 5th, which was unfortunate, but only, just shy of 270 votes of being in 3rd place. And so have great respect for all of those folks that Sean Wright and Kurt Wade and Bill Shacklett, who were the incumbents that won and were running. And we'll see. I enjoy the experience, and at this point and still planning on doing it again in 2 years, and unless my wife or somebody else can talk me out of it. But so that's really my story. That's who I am. That's where I've come from. I think as we have conversations with guests that come in on the podcast, obviously elements of my story will be brought up. So I think it was important to kind of start there, because I'll probably share somewhat out of context different experiences that I've had. So if you've listened to this kind of introductory episode, you will be able to draw from more of the context of my story and where I've came from, and really why the values of faith, family, community, and health are so important to me. And I'd really like to spend some time really diving into those 4 values, of why they're my 4 core values, and how they kind of shape me and the things that I do, and my why in a lot of ways, which really translated to the why of this podcast. So really what I'd like to do now is kind of dive into these core values that I keep bringing up, of faith and family and community and health, and explain to you how those core values help guide me and my decision making and my actions that I take, and really also kind of explain how these values inspired me to start the podcast. So I think first what I will do before we fully dive into that is, I guess, really give you my definition of legacy. I think one of the things that you can expect consistency wise with each episode is I'm going to ask every guest at the beginning of the podcast. They really kind of kick off the conversation, but really this draws into the purpose and the theme of the podcast, Legacy Builders, is what does legacy mean to you? How do you define legacy? So I think it's important that you know how I define legacy. So for me, and I'm looking down because I want to make sure I get my definition right to you. But so legacy is the lasting impact that we leave on the lives of others, shaped by how we live, love, and lead. For me, a meaningful legacy is built on 4 foundational pillars: faith, family, community, and health. So that's how I define legacy. It is really centered around those 4 pillars of faith, family, community, and health. And so for me, as I've talked about in sharing my story, the importance of faith. And for me, that's the foundation of really everything in my life, and something that my parents instilled in me from an early age. So I think legacy for me, again, this is how I define it, but it is faith is the foundation of legacy, and where legacy begins. I think it's really a commitment to living out the gospel. I mean, for those of us who are believers, faith to us is living out and striving to be the best that we can, knowing and living out the hope and the grace that we have through what Jesus Christ did for us on the cross. So that's faith. That's the core, kind of the foundation of legacy. I alluded to family and how important family is to me, and how it in a lot of ways it's another pillar and value of legacy for me, because of the importance and how I grew up. I mean, I mentioned I think I mentioned my grandparents lived basically across the street. My dad has 3 sisters. 2 of the 3 lived within walking distance in the same neighborhood. And so I grew up literally seeing family every day. And I think back now, what a blessing that is. My wife's family lives here. Hopefully someday my parents will move over here. I know the rest of their family probably wouldn't like that, but I'd love that experience for my kids, because being able to run out the front door across the street, it was really my grandparents' backyard, but to my grandparents' house was, I mean, I don't know how many other people I meet had that type of experience, and just the memories that were made from being able to do that. Just run over to my grandmother's house and grab a snack or eat dinner or go run errands with her or my granddad. So for me, family kind of, you've got faith, which is really kind of like foundational, but I think family for me is kind of the heart of legacy. It's about nurturing relationships. It's about creating a foundation of love and passing down those values that foster strength and resilience and connection to those that we hold closest to us. I know I alluded to earlier, oftentimes family, there could be times, or may have been times, if not in your life, but certainly in mine, where, it feels like family is all you have. And so I think if we can pass down a legacy of the importance of family to our kids and to our grandkids, to me, that is such a it's the heart of legacy. I just said it. So that's a really cool thing that we can do for our kids that really does leave a lasting impact after we're gone. And then the next one is community. A true legacy extends just beyond our family into the community that we have the opportunity to serve. It's about contributing to the greater good, building bridges, not literally, but somewhat literally, maybe depending on the position you are in the community, and then and creating opportunities for people to thrive. I think for me, that is what I got the greatest sense of pride from being able to step foot in that state capitol every single day and sit around the table with other colleagues and think about how can we make the lives of 6.5 million people better. And so that's the heart of community, and that's the heart of really of service. And really for me, that was the heart behind running for city council because community is a core value of mine. I feel so strongly about giving back to my community in which I live and where I'm raising my family. And so that spurred me on to want to be able to give back in a position of where I had leadership and the ability to affect change. That was what I look back on the opportunity to work in the governor's office is you really had a huge ability, a massive ability to affect change for the better. And so I think that's what community is about, the ability to love on people, to help them thrive, to really work towards the greater good for all people, no matter color, creed, background, stripes, politically, all of those things. I think community really, in a lot of ways, transcends that. And then the fourth one being health. And really, I think for me, I don't know that this is probably a newer addition for me in the past several years, and even really, frankly, in the past 3 or 4 months even. And I really, in a lot of ways, have Shane Reeves, who is still a friend and mentor, to thank for this, because it is actually one of his core values. But I think taking care of yourself is one of the best ways that really you have the ability to do the other 3 things that are part of this legacy. If you are not taking care of yourself, your body, and I'm going to say health, I'm going to lump into health, spiritual health and physical health, and then really in some degrees mental health. Those are kind of the 3 things underneath health that are key. If you're not taking care of those 3 things, it's really hard for you to be able to give back to your community. It's really hard for you to be present with your family, especially if you're a dad and a husband. And then really your faith itself is going to suffer as a result of that. So just practically speaking, for me, over the past over 2 years now, I've been a member at a local kind of private studio gym, TriFit, where I've got a group of guys who the banter is strong, but the accountability is great. And really just the brotherhood and really the sense of community that is even in that space that's created there. So that's been something that I have carved out and made sure every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, to the best of my ability, I'm there at 6 a.m. To get better. And that transitions into, being careful about the things I eat, and really one of the things that at the end of most of these episodes I'll likely do is ask people, what have you been reading recently, so we can learn from it. And for me, I alluded to the past several months. I'm almost done with a book called Outlive: The Science and Art of Longevity. It's by a guy named Dr. Peter Attia, Attia. And honestly, it was some guys in the gym talking about it who actually are doctors. And it's just been a fascinating read for me, and maybe we'll do an episode on that, or just a small segment on what I've learned and kind of pull out the key themes of that, kind of what you call the 80-20 principle, and share that with you guys. But for the purposes of this conversation of health, it has been honestly a formative book for me and how I think about health, and really, the importance of health too, and how that ties into longevity. Again, to kind of reemphasize a point, if you're not focused on your spiritual health and your physical health and your mental health, it's really hard for you to be active and involved in your community to the degree and the potential that you have. And then beyond that, it's hard for you to give your family your all, and then really your faith suffers, especially if the spiritual health of that is not well. So those are my core values, and those are really, for me, those four things are what drive a lot of my decision making and the actions that I take. And so I hope that this episode, or these first few couple episodes of Legacy Builders, has gotten you excited about what's to come. I hope you're excited about just the concept and the vision for Legacy Builders. This really, even though we started with me, this podcast is not at all, if I wanted to, when I was researching names, there's of course, these are much bigger names than Matt Herriman, but so many people could just call it the Tucker Carlson show, or the Matt Herriman show. This is not the Matt Herriman show. There was a lot of intent and intentionality behind Legacy Builders, and I'm just super excited about this opportunity to bring to you the stories and the experiences of people from our community, and so that we can learn from them, and hopefully be edified and spurred on to bigger and better things. So I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope you'll stick with us, and look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of Legacy Builders with Matt Herriman. Be sure to go like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite platform, and we would just love it if you left us a 5-star review as well. We'll see you next time.